Let me begin by starting to talk about a little bit about who I am and what I do. When I was meeting people today, I was asked, so what do you do? And what I actually do, as soon as my slide comes up, it'll do. There we go, thank you. What I actually do is I work in the field of applying cognitive science, cognitive psychology, to improve people's performance. And so I get to work with organizations, I get to work with individuals, I get to work with companies. We work with a lot of communities. Now, how does that apply to what I want to talk about? What I really want to talk about is I actually think, and this is the idea that I'd like to advance at TED, is I actually think that we can actually apply cognitive psychology to actually achieving peace. And I actually also think that if we actually do that one mind at a time, it's doable. And I hope through this presentation I can prove that that mind is actually yours. So the question you might be asking is, what is coexistence? What's peaceful coexistence? About 5 or 6 years ago, I came across the terminology, and it seemed to just draw me into it. I didn't know why I was attracted to it, but what peaceful coexistence means is that we can peacefully coexist in the same place at the same time, given diversity. And whether that's diversity of religion, whether that's diversity of culture, whether that's diversity of political, social beliefs, all those things. So why is that important, and why is that important now? One of the things that I have become is an observer of sort of behavior that I see and sort of what we see around the globe. When we start to look at some of the political issues that are taking place, and I'm an optimistic about peace, but I am concerned a little bit about how we start to see the polarization within political beliefs. And if we particularly look at our US friends and we kind of look over the fence as a good neighbor, and we see how polarized they seem to be in terms of strongly held political beliefs. And what seems to have taken place is there doesn't seem to be any more space for peaceful coexistence within that. As I kind of observe that as a good neighbor, I almost want to kind of jump over the fence and shake him and say, hey, wake up. There's an opportunity to be able to live and coexist in the same place at the same time. What we seem to see happen in this is we start to see erosion of civility, erosion of compassion, erosion of good citizenship. If I go a little bit farther and think about this in terms of religion, one of the things that we start to see in religion is that we start to see polarization in that. And it's okay when we have a position of moderate religious position, but when we move to that position of fundamentalist, there doesn't seem to be any space for compromise. And one of the things that we start to see growing in terms of some of the actions that are taking place around the world is that the position that we start to take on Islamic fundamentalist or Islamic in any given situation. So what's now concerning me is how we start to form this opinion, this belief about a certain race or a certain religion. Driving this a little bit closer to home in Saskatchewan is one of the things that we've noticed in the last little while is that the amount of immigration that has taken place in Saskatchewan. Over the last year or so, what we've seen is a number, almost 9,000 new immigrants to Saskatchewan. In terms of peaceful coexistence, the biggest conflict areas are in the areas of political, religious, and cultural differences. And if we look back into the US, what we see is that polarization. If we look into religions, we start to see fundamentalist positions against moderate positions, which cause conflict. When we start to look at this in our home province of Saskatchewan, with 9,000 new Canadians coming in Saskatchewan, it seems like the possibility is that we could be running into some space of conflict. Now, if I start to apply the theories of cognitive psychology to this, and we start to think about what we think about, what we know on this from a cognitive psychology perspective is that human beings think in 3 dimensions. They think in terms of words, pictures, and emotions. So what happens is that we start to have thoughts and experiences that form into beliefs. And once those beliefs start to form up, they form into behaviors. And once they form into behaviors, they become part of us and become part of our normal. The other theory that we can bring forward in terms of cognitive psychology is looking at the theory of Gestalt. Gestalt is a thought, a psychology that says human beings cannot hold 2 conflicting views at the same time. We need to be able to bring resolution to that. So if you're looking at this picture, most of us would want to do what with that picture? We'd want to put it back which way? Straighten it up the way it's supposed to be. The way it's supposed to be is our normal. And so now if I go a little bit further into this, is how do our normals form? How do our beliefs form? There's a theory in terms of how our mind works in a thought process. And our thought process works on the conscious level, the subconscious level, and the creative subconscious level. You heard Jay talk about that creativity and that innovation comes from the subconscious. Well, if we think about this as a way of understanding how cognitive psychology plays in this and how it plays out in peaceful coexistence, our conscious mind is like a videotape that's recording everything that's going on. It's looking out and recording it. And where it's recording it is into our hard drive in our subconscious mind. And as soon as we form a belief, a truth, a reality, it forms onto our subconscious mind. And once it forms into that, our creative subconscious mind's job function is to make sure we behave consistent to what we believe to be true. So if you think about this, the fail point in this is the space of where we start to form that into our subconscious mind. And we act in accordance to the truth as we believe it to be. But here's the kicker. The kicker is it's possible that what we form to believe be true may not be true. Now if we take this, so we talked about peaceful coexistence. We've talked about how the mind works. We talked about why we need to think about peaceful coexistence given the political, religious, and cultural differences. Now let me take this and give you some examples of where we can look at a behavior. And what I'd really like you to do is not lock onto the behavior of these images, but what I'd like you to think about is what is the belief in behind this? What is the thought that must have happened that created this behavior? So I want to go into 3 disciplines in terms of anger, conflict, and violence. So if we look at this first picture. So when I saw this and when I was searching for an image that would tell me something, I looked at this image and then the immediate reaction I had was, look at that little guy and look at the behavior that we see. So we could lock on to, we could think about that behavior and we could think about that in terms of a judgment to that. But if you really go back and you think about what is the belief that this little guy might have? What is the thought or experience that actually got this little guy to form that behavior? Now if we pause there for a second and think about, now fast forward into the future. What do you think this little guy's behavior might be when if he continues with this belief and thought? Where do you think this will lead to when he turns to be 15, 20, 30, 40? So if we go a little bit deeper onto this, and we look at this picture, I found this to be a stunning picture for a number of reasons. And again, if we look at we could judge this. We could look at this in terms of behavior that we're seeing. But really, I use the same idea, is apply cognitive psychology to this. Apply to this too. Now, if you look at that little guy behind there, he looks like he's just petrified. Interesting enough, the little girl looks scared, but she almost looks like she's curious. If we go to the mom and she's just in that position of vulnerability and trying to protect her child. And so if you really think about this now, what do you think is being stored in the subconscious mind of those little kids and that mom? And what do you think is happening in terms of their forming a belief that'll form a behavior that'll form a normal? If I go one more step on this and we think about this picture, and if you can't see it at the back, this is an interesting and almost disturbing picture in a number of ways. Is you see what looks like a mom and a son who are attacking a woman. And not only they are attacking her, but there's physical violence in terms of kicking. And then also the mom pulling off the burqa or headdress of the woman. Now, if again, we apply cognitive psychology to this, and we think about our thoughts and experience create a belief, our belief forms into a behavior that forms into a normal. We think about this in terms of gestalt and how our job function of our gestalt is make sure we put the picture back the way it's supposed to be. If we connect this to what's stored in the subconscious mind of this mom, the subconscious mind of the son, or the subconscious mind of the woman that's being attacked. So, where this leads us to is sort of now connecting the dots, if I can apply this to the peaceful coexistence. One of the things that we know is that human beings are always in search of normal. So as soon as we form things as normal, we want to maintain them. So one of the things that we teach, and one of the things I would try to convince you on, is in many cases our normal is our enemy. So now what we go into in another theory in cognitive psychology is that the goal comes first, and then we perceive. So when we heard the speakers this morning talking about they didn't really know what to do, they just set the goal. That's a natural instinct that we see in cognitive psychology, in the goal comes first and then we perceive. So if we start to add this in terms of another picture here, another image. One of the goals that I'd like to do, and I'd almost like to put this into a double dog dare. And the double dog dare would be if we could set the goal as human beings, as a society, to act with civility. So when we see people of a diversity, we see people of a different viewpoint, that we act with civility. This image was taken in 2008 after Barack Obama won the election. And why I particularly like this image, it wasn't about the winning of Barack Obama. It was actually about the concession speech that John McCain made. John McCain, I don't know if you remember this, but he was speaking to his group of supporters. And what he was really saying to them was, thank you for all the support. And then he mentioned the word Barack Obama. And his whole supporters erupted in a boo. And within a millisecond of them erupting into a boo, he put his hand up and he said, stop. And he stopped and he said, President Barack Obama is my president. And you just put that into context about the civility that it would take to be able to go through that long road of an election, to be able to get to a spot where you weren't successful, but to be able to have the civility and the foresight to think in terms of Barack Obama as my president. When we think about another double dog dare in the same category, is that what we can see is that compassion plays a significant role in peaceful coexistence. And one of the things I'd like to challenge you with and put sort of as the double dog dare again is that how we start to see compassion play out is if you can take a position of non-judgmental. When we looked at those images of behaviors, it would have been easy to jump to a conclusion and form a judgment on that. So one of the patterns that we would see is that you move to a non-judgmental position. But at the same time, one of the next steps up in terms of compassion is move to a spot of forgiveness, where you can forgive people that have done wrong to you. The last position of compassion is taking a position of love. This becomes harder and harder when you're in conflict, to be able to be in conflict with somebody and to demonstrate non-judgmental and forgiveness and love. But love, by definition of agape love, is a love that is always protecting and respecting the dignity of humanity. We heard Dr. Barnard talk about citizenship, and one of the ways and the pathways to peaceful coexistence is through citizenship, and it is about involving, and it is about getting engaged. But it's not just getting engaged and it's getting involved. It is not becoming a cynic about when somebody has a different point of view. There seems to be a number of things that have formed in the world, and particularly politics or religion, where we take a position against, we take a position of tearing down, we move from being constructive to being destructive. So one of the things that I would challenge us is to think about civility, think about compassion, think about citizenship. The last goal that I would like to see, and actually TED actually represents this. TED is taking multiple ideas and congregating them in the same place at the same time. And we're looking for ways that we can build on that diversity. So if I could get you to think about moving into a position of peaceful coexistence and how this actually looks like, it doesn't have to be on the world stage. It could actually be in a position where you're bringing peaceful coexistence with a coworker, peaceful coexistence with somebody that you were in conflict in your family, peaceful coexistence that happens in your community. So it's about stepping up. It's about taking that leadership. Jeff was talking about some work that he does at Sherbrooke Community Center, and I've had the great fortune and great opportunity to be able to read my book at a book club at the Sherbrooke Community Center. It's been an amazing experience to be able to hear people in that particular situation think about how to internalize peaceful coexistence. And one of the things that I'd leave you with is I'd like to triple dog dare you. And the triple dog dare is I want you to act like Clarence. Clarence is one of the residents at Sherbrooke Community Center, and after giving this talk to him and reading my book to him, he was being escorted back to his room. And typically what would happen at Sherbrooke would be that many of the residents would actually move to a position and just get back to their room and be put in front of the TV. And Clarence said, you know what, I don't want the TV on. I just want to be able to think about what I think about. So if I could put this forward to you, is that I think in fact there's a way to be able to apply cognitive psychology, the way that we think, to be able to achieve world peace really. That the first step is to be able to go into peaceful coexistence. It also includes civility, compassion, and citizenship. Thank you very much.